Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest Minty Minutes. This is episode number 4? Yeah, I think it's episode number 4 actually, which is pretty cool. We've actually done 4 of these now. Yeah, this is Minty Minutes. This is the monthly podcast, I guess, that I have been doing, just to basically talk about some things that I haven't made videos on that, kind of just get like, some more off-the-brain type of thoughts for, usually for like other series or whatever that I'm not doing reaction videos to, or other bigger videos if this is the first time joining in. And this one, unlike last month, I should say, the joke of it was that it wasn't a short episode, even though I said it was going to be a short episode. It turned out to not be. This one, I do intend to actually have it be a shorter episode, because I'm only actually talking about two shows that I've started watching. And if you've been following the community post that I've been doing, that I actually just started doing again, just to update about this, the two shows were the new Netflix Avatar adaptation and Percy Jackson and the Olympians, the Disney Plus live-action adaptation. I say live-action adaptation for Percy Jackson, like, it's based on a book, so like it's just an adaptation at that point. But either way, so I've been excited for both of these shows for different reasons. Avatar for obvious reasons, because, you know, I just watched Avatar last year for this channel, and it really helped the channel grow, and I really enjoyed it, and really had a good time watching it for the first time. And then Percy Jackson is a series that I kind of grew up with. I remember I got the first book from a Scholastic book fair and didn't read it. Just like didn't read it for years. I tried reading it. Ironically enough, I tried reading the first Percy Jackson book when I was younger, and I had issues focusing and reading it, because I just had issues focusing and reading. I loved reading. I absolutely loved reading, loved the stories and everything, but I just had an issue doing it. And then there was like just one day I was like in the car ride or whatever, just like taking a trip or something, and I brought the book with me, and I read like half the book in like an hour. Don't know how, don't know what happened there, but I did it, and I really enjoyed it, because I love mythology and all that stuff. But I'll talk about Percy Jackson later. So I want to talk about these two shows first off, and then I guess I'll do like a little fun thing at the end just to bring the mood up, just because I will say from the jump here, I'm not vibing with these two shows. I am just not vibing with it. There's some definite stuff about both of these adaptations that I am not vibing with on particular levels, and I'm going to try to be critical here, and not just like fan yells at cloud kind of a thing for like, oh, they ruined my adaptation, rah. I want to try to be actually like critical here as to what, so like why I'm feeling these things and what I'm feeling. I haven't watched fully both series yet. I have not seen the full series of both. I watched the first half. I watched the first 4 episodes of both series, watching episode 4 for both of them the morning that I recorded this as well. So I'll just go through those. No real spoilers for anything. I'm gonna try to not really do that many spoilers. I mean, it's gonna be just a little difficult to not talk about spoilers, at least in some vague sense, just because of adaptations. But at the same time, is like, these are adaptations of older properties. So it's like Avatar came out in, what, 2005 originally? So it's like the whole series out there. And then Percy Jackson, I believe, also came out in, actually I think that one came out in 2009. I think it was when the first book released, but whatever. Either way, so I'm going to try to be as like spoiler free as I can, while still being, you know, clear about what I'm talking about. So let's just get into it. Let's talk about Avatar first, because Avatar I have stronger feelings on, and also those feelings do carry over to Percy Jackson as well, so it kind of helped me explain Percy Jackson a little bit more. So far with Avatar, I am not vibing, and I'm not necessarily liking the direction that they took this adaptation. And I know from like some articles and some stories that the original creators of the show, the actual original show, had left the project pretty early on due to creative differences with what the studio was wanting them to do and what the producers wanted them to do, which is never a good sign. That is never a good sign when the original creators like, yo, we don't like where this is going, and we're the ones who created this. And then they, you know, are now in the charge of Avatar Studios, which is doing the animated stuff, which is good. That stuff's cool. So just from the get-go, like, the main issue I'm having with the show is the tone of it. The tone is very different than the original series, and on some level that can be a good thing. I'm not necessarily wanting an adaptation to be a one-for-one of the original story. I am wanting it to be faithful in a sense to the ideals and to like the feeling of the original story, and that's kind of my take on adaptations in general. Like, as long as they're faithful to the feeling that you got from the original thing, that's cool. Which is why, like, I liked Mario. The Mario movie, yeah, it's a kid's movie. There's some definite like illumination stuff in it, but it felt like Mario. It had that Mario vibe to it. Sonic the Hedgehog movies are the same way, especially with Sonic 2, where it's like, yeah, they're not retelling the story of Sonic, but they're giving us all the notes for Sonic that we want, which is, yes, both of those are like video game adaptation movies, and it's kind of an interesting thing that we're going with there. Same with Castlevania, which you can watch the Castlevania Nocturne series on my channel here. But back to Avatar, though. So the tone that we're getting for this live action series is a lot more dramatic, a lot darker, a lot more cynical, where I don't feel like Avatar should be that. Avatar should be a show about hope, a show about fun, and a show about finding the light within the darkness. Well, we're getting a lot of darkness in the show up to episode 4. There's a lot of darkness, not a lot of light. There's not a lot of light moments in the show so far. And yeah, the joke about Avatar is like, wow, they're doing like some war crimes in this show. Yes, they are, and there's some definite war crimes going on because there's a war going on. But what we're seeing in the animated show was the side stories. We're getting to see the world build out. We're going to see the fleshed out nature of the world that they live in. We're getting to see how the war is affecting the smaller communities, how it's affecting the smaller towns, why there is like a rebellion group like Jet's group, the Freedom Fighters, fighting, why the Earth Kingdom is so secluded, why the water tribes are, away from each other. We're seeing why all this is happening. We're seeing a lot more of like Iroh and Zuko building their familial relationship. We're seeing a lot more of Aang, bring back fun to the world. We're not really seeing much of that in the show, and one of the main reasons for that is because it's 8 episodes. It is a shortened series. One good thing I will say, and this is a Netflix thing that is an issue for some streaming services, and an issue also for Netflix at times as well. Each episode is roughly an hour long. Like, they are between 45 and 60 minutes, with the first episode being, I believe, 65 minutes, possibly an hour and a half. I can't exactly remember, but the first episode is long. Like, they put a lot in that first episode. So that is a positive. That is a definite positive of the show, is like the episodes are lengthy. They are putting some work into the episodes. However, they still only have 8 episodes, where the original series of Avatar had, what, 24? 22? Something like that. You can tell a lot more story in 22 episodes that are half hour each than you can in 8 episodes that are an hour each. So they're basically having to cut over half, or at least half, of the stories from the original series, which doesn't necessarily have to be an issue, as long as they're telling the stories well. And the problem with cutting some of these stories is they're cutting the world building, they're cutting the character development, and that's one of the big issues I've been having so far. Each of the characters don't feel like they're having any development. There's no real sense of character with any of these characters. The worst one, I think, is honestly Aang, where, without getting into any real thing, Aang doesn't feel like Aang. He feels way too broody. He doesn't really feel fun. But he also feels like the least important part of the entire cast, and it's his show. Like, it's a show about him, about the Avatar coming back, and he feels like one of the least important things in the entirety of the show up to episode 4, and it feels weird. The relationship between him, Sokka, and Katara also feels weird, and yeah, they feel friendly enough to each other, but like, the actual dynamics of Sokka and Katara feel off, and their characters also feel off for various reasons because of how they were adapted, mainly, and also again because we're missing the side stories. So like Sokka, one of the big things with him, and this came out in an article before the show came out, is that they removed him being kind of sexist in the story to make it like appeal to modern audiences, without realizing that whole point of him is actually called character growth, and that's actually a whole big thing in his story, is that, yeah, he's kind of sexist, not because he is like rude or, you know, oppressive or anything, but because he was so sheltered and had to be incredibly masculine and incredibly mature for his young age, because he was the protector of his village. And his tribe was pretty traditional with the fact that there was basically no men in the village because they all went off to be soldiers. He was just raised on this idea that men go and fight and the women stay home and, like, you know, raise the families and protect things. That's just unfortunately how he was raised. And then when he meets Suki and the Koshi warriors, he's basically like immediately turned off from them and like, oh wait, this world is a lot bigger than the tribe. And that's fine, and that's cool, and he grows from there. With removing that aspect of Sokka, they have to try and find a whole other story for him, and a whole other like character growth for him, and they haven't really been able to do that, and he feels like a weird character. He still feels fine, but he feels weird. Like, same with Katara. Katara feels fine, but she's missing a lot of her aspects because in the original series, she's more like motherly, more caring, but very emotive about it, because she's basically trying to get Aang and Sokka to knock off their joking. Well, if there's not really any joking in the series and not any time for them to be joking, there's not really any time for her to be like emotive for that, or like, you know, saying what's on her mind or anything. She's just very straightforward, hardly talks at all, really soft-spoken until she starts yelling, and also weirdly like argumentative to Sokka and to Aang. Actually, not even really to Aang. She doesn't really talk to Aang hardly at all. So like, it's just, again, it's weird, and I don't really necessarily want this whole thing to be like me comparing everything to the original series, but when you're adapting something like Avatar: The Last Airbender, you kind of have to compare to the original series, especially since the original series is still there. Like, it is still there, you can watch it. And they are continuing it with Legend of Korra. And now with this new series they're going to be making, or this new movie at least, following the gang in like their 20s. And then there's going to be the Kyoshi series at some point, the Roku series at some point. So like, there is continuations to the original series. So it's just weird what they're doing with this. But beyond the character stuff, because the characters are weird. Also, just talk about Zuko and Iroh just a little bit real quick. Zuko, I feel like, is the one so far that translated kind of the best. He still feels like Zuko. He still has those character beats of Zuko. They're a little slower than they were in the show. And I blame the fact on that Iroh feels different. Iroh feels a lot more closed off than he did in the animated series, where Iroh basically like wore his heart on his sleeve. He was a very caring person. We saw that from the very beginning, where he's like, hey, I did some bad things in my life, but I'm trying to repent from that. We don't necessarily get that from this version of Iroh, which kind of sucks, because it's Iroh, it's Uncle Iroh. He's like the best character in the entire series. So like, we're not really getting that from him, and it feels a little weird. We're getting it like in bits and pieces, but not like overly. So it's a bit odd. But like, his relationship with Zuko is still there, and overall it's still like the most well translated thing in the series so far. But it still can use a little bit of work. But also, there are 4 more episodes left. I've heard they get a little bit better near the end, especially with Zuko, where Zuko just heads and shoulders is just the best character in the whole show, as per the usual. But you know, so that's that. But yeah, so get back to the whole pace, like the whole pacing and everything. So they cut down the story into 8 episodes, which means that they're condensing a lot of the stories together into the same episodes. So this one is going to be a bit of a spoiler, but it is in the description of the episode. But episode 3, they go to Omashu. And Omashu is a really big point in the original anime series. That's where we meet King Bumi. That's where Aang learns more about earthbending, learns about what has happened in the 100 years that he's been gone. And we also get Zuko and Iroh doing some stuff as well outside of Omashu. We get a lot of stuff. Also, we get Secret Tunnel. This was fun, Secret Tunnel. But we get a lot of stuff with Omashu. Well, in the adaptation here, they took Omashu, and they also took the story with the Mechanist, and they also took the story with Jet, and they put them all together. And it's like, okay, that's a lot going on at once. It does work for this version of the story, but it still feels like a lot happening at once, where not any of that really gets time to shine, or time to really express itself, and it's over the course of 2 episodes as well. So it's like there's a lot going on there without them being able to flesh it all out. And that's basically up to the episode 4. Like, the stuff they do in the beginning up to episode 4 is basically getting Aang and then going to Amashu. And it's kind of weird the fact that that's all this stuff. And then also episode 2 is Kyoshi Warriors, which I have a lot of issues with that episode in general, but I'm not going to say it here because spoilers, and I want to wait to watch the whole series before I get into my thoughts about the Kyoshi Warriors. So I love the Kyoshi Warriors so much. But yeah, so like the pacing of the whole show feels very strange, but also the world feels really small, and that goes back to, again, like I've been saying, them cutting out the side stories. And if you cut out the side stories, you're cutting out these small towns, cutting out the like side characters that we meet off and on throughout the series, and you're making the world feel a lot smaller because everyone now has to be in the same area. Like I said with the Mashu, it's like if you bring the Mechanist and Jet into a Mashu, then you're eliminating the Eastern Air Temple, I think it was, or the Northern Air Temple, where the Mechanist was. One of the Air Temples. You're eliminating that whole storyline. With Jet, you're eliminating the guerrilla warfare story with the one town they were going to flood. You're eliminating that. You're moving, I believe, if I remember correctly, you're moving where June is, which I know she is in the series, but you're moving where she is, I believe. It's been a year since I've seen Avatar. You're moving a lot of stuff around, so you're condensing the world, so you're not really seeing the full effects of the war happening. You're not really seeing these side characters, which is, it's a shame, because all these characters are really great and they're really good for the story, and there's a lot of good character development that comes from them. Another issue that I'm having with this series that is a definite critique, and this is something that actually is going to carry over into Percy Jackson as well, is there's a lot of exposition. There's so much exposition dumping. And this is not just an issue with this series. This is an issue with a lot of limited series now, a lot of the streaming series, a lot of just modern TV in general, is that there's way too much exposition, and there's not enough showing without telling. This series has an issue with telling, because in writing there's the age-old lesson of show don't tell, where if you're trying to basically say like, hey, a character is happy, you don't want a character to be like, hey, I'm really happy right now. You instead want to show what they're doing to make them happy. You want to show why they're happy. This series has an issue with just flat out telling us what every character is thinking, and it was kind of to me, it felt like almost a joke, where in the very first episode we get a big flashback, or I guess not even a flashback, we get like the origin of Aang or whatever that were hinted at in the original series, and Aang just straight up tells us his entire character arc. And it's like, we could have seen that over the course of the series rather than you just telling us right now to Appa. Also, Appa looks great. Okay, all the CG looks great enough. Like, it looks good enough. We don't hardly see Appa, which kind of sucks, but, you know, they gotta save money somewhere. Appa looks great. All the animals look great. But, and then there's another part with Gran. I hated Gran as a character. Like, she was the worst at all this expedition, because she was just there in the village and it's like, hey, Aang, let me just tell you everything you missed in 100 years, and also be a bit condescending about this. But then I don't even know if I want to say it, because it is a spoiler, but it's one of those like things that's just so funnily stupid that I kind of want people to just experience it for themselves. So I'll put a timestamp here, and I will say it, but I put a timestamp here. Just skip to this little timestamp if you don't want to hear the spoiler. So I'm just going to say this right now. Gran literally just says the opening of the show. She just like, water, air, earth, fire, the 4 nations lived in peace and harmony until the Fire Nation attacked. She literally goes through the entirety of the opening of the series, and everyone in that shot and everyone in that scene has just such a serious look on their face, like, yeah, this is the story we've all been told. And they're doing like a weird Dutch angle as well to make it like kind of unsettling. And I'm just sitting there on my couch watching this. I'm just laughing. I am laughing because I'm like, they can't seriously just have put the opening as exposition. Like, that's the opening of the show. Even worse, they don't even have the opening of the show. Like, they had it in the first episode. They did like the silhouette thing, which was really cool. And then they just don't do it after that, which is like, that's a big part of the series, is the opening. So I hated that. I hated that, but hated it because it was so stupidly funny. So back in the timestamp here. So yeah, so my issue is that there's just way too much exposition, along with way too much of just blatantly telling us how characters are feeling, what backstory is going on, instead of letting us discover it and let us figure it out. There's a lot of hand-holding in the series, which again isn't necessarily an issue with this series. It's an issue with a lot of modern shows like this, where it's trying to appeal to an audience that isn't really paying attention to what's actually happening. So they're not trying to put subtlety into the writing. They're not putting subtlety into the show. And I would imagine the writing crew on this show was trying to do the best they could with it, and then they're just being cut for directing, or they're being cut with production or whatever. So I'm not surprised from that. But yeah, there's a lot of hand-holding where they're just like, yeah, let's just tell the audience what's going on here because we know they're not paying attention to it. And you feel that. You really feel that. And it really takes away from everything else. But on the positive, because I do like to be positive here, there is some positives. I do think the casting of pretty much every character feels fine. Like, they feel fine. The acting is a bit all over the place, I will say, and that I'm blaming on the directors of the episodes rather than the cast, though the cast of the main gang, this is basically like their second role ever, some of them for their first role ever, so they can use a little more time to like hone their skills. But again, I'm blaming the director more than anything, because like, you can get a good performance out of anyone if you're a good director, and that's been said multiple times by many actors across the years of filmmaking. It's like, you can get a good performance out of anyone if you're a good director, so I'm blaming the director on that. But yeah, the cast is pretty stellar, look-wise, from everyone. I love who they cast as Iroh, even if I don't necessarily like Iroh in the series. I love who they cast as Sokka, even if I'm not necessarily liking Sokka in the series. Zuko was the one that really grew on me, though, because I'm like, yeah, this guy feels like Zuko after a while. Now, who they cast as Suki, though, perfect. Perfection. Same with all of the Freedom Fighters. Every one of the Freedom Fighters, perfection. All of them, great. Boomy was a little weird. And I'm not going to go into spoilers for Boomy, because that's actually like full spoilers, but like, Boomy was a little weird. And I had my issues with Boomy in the animated series, but he definitely grew on me. Boomy was a bit weird here. But beyond that, the cast is good so far. Also, Ozai. We've only seen a little bit of Ozai, but whew, Ozai is great. Ozai is pretty damn great. So I will say that. And that's pretty much all I got for Avatar. Also, some of the music's great too. Like, some of the background music is really good. There's one really good scene in episode 4, or a couple really good scenes in episode 4. We get a little bit of backstory on Iroh and some Zuko as well. I'm not going to spoil what happens there, but there's a really, really good music motif there. Made me tear up a little bit, because I'm like, oh, they're actually doing this. Oh, that's good. That's really good. So that was cool. In general, for the first half of the series, just feels like they're doing too much with not enough time. And by cutting out a lot of the side stories, they're cutting out a lot of character development, and they've like fundamentally changed what this show is trying to say, and what this show is like talking about, and what the show is about. And I don't like it, but I'm going to finish watching to see if it does get better by the end. But I can tell you that visually, it's stunning. Like, visually, the show is stunning. It looks really good. The lighting is really good. The effects are really good. They're good enough for the most part. The bending is pretty cool looking for the most part. It looks a little rough in spots, but it is pretty good for the most part. All the costuming looks really good and really vibrant, and I like that. Might not be necessarily the most accurate portrayals of the most like period piece kind of things, but this is a fantasy world, so it's fine. Like I said, all the animals look really great. So like all the visually, the show looks good. It's just the feeling behind all of that is like a really good like icing on cake, but then the cake is really undercooked. I think that's the best way to describe it. It's like some really stunning looking icing, really great decorative icing, and the cake isn't finished. The cake is not baked. And that's basically my thoughts on Avatar so far. Yeah, so let me know down in the comments below what you think about Avatar so far. Up to episode 4 at least. I try to go any spoilers, even though the series has been out for at least a month now, and also is an adaptation of the anime series that's been out from like you know, 20 years at this point. But, you know, whatever. So that's Avatar. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on that. So, to move on now to Percy Jackson. Percy Jackson and the Olympians. So, I already kind of said my backstory with Percy Jackson a little bit. I got the book when I was, like, Scholastic Book Fair or whatever. But I finally actually read the book in high school. And the thing is, like, this is a quote unquote, this is a children's book series. But the way it's written is it's written for any audience to read it. Because Rick Riordan is such a great writer, just in general, that he can make a story this audience is a children's age, like a middle grade age, that it's written in a way that anyone can read it, anyone can still really enjoy it, and really feel the story. Yeah, some of the humor in the book is focused towards kids, and some of the writing is focused towards kids, yes. But the overall story is a really solid story that can be said to anyone, and it's mythology. Like, it's a really good modern retelling of mythology to get people interested in it. And I'm a big mythology nerd. I love mythology so much. I try to incorporate it into a lot of the things that I write, a lot of like the D&D games I play, or, you know, like shows I watch, whatever. I try to incorporate like some mythology because I just like mythology in general. So Percy Jackson was something that really spoke to me growing up, even if I didn't necessarily read all the books. When I was growing up, when I was in high school, I read the first two, got to the third one, got a few chapters into the third one. I didn't finish it though, sadly, because just other stuff was coming up. But I did go back recently and listen to audiobooks of the first two books that I found on YouTube, just like a fan reading, but that dude did a great job, and it was really like, it felt really like wholesome and rustic, because like you could hear the pages turning, you could hear him like stumble a few times. It was great. Listen to those at work. So I just did re-listen to the first two books, at least. I'm going to finish the rest of the series later, but I wanted to at least get myself back into the world a bit before going into the series, to say like try and compare and contrast or whatever. And similar to Avatar and similar to that adaptation, I'm having a rough time with this one. I'm having a real rough time with this one for similar reasons that I was with Avatar. And it's an issue with how they're adapting the story, because they're doing Lightning Thief for the first season, which makes sense. Like if you're gonna do each season being a book, which is completely reasonable and completely fair. Yeah, first season Lightning Thief is good. Second season being Sea of Monsters, good. Third season Titan's Curse, yeah, that makes sense. So, you know, on and on and on. So all that makes sense. So having the first season be Lightning Thief and having basically each like 2 to 3 chapters being an episode, because it's 8 episodes again, just like with Avatar's 8 episodes. Having each episode be like 2 to 3 chapters, understandable. Each chapter for the actual book are fairly short. I think it was like 20 chapters in total. So like you can reasonably shorten it down to 8 episodes and be fine, mixing a lot of those episodes together, or a lot of those chapters together. Like the first episode of the series puts together the first 4 chapters, I believe. Second episode puts together like the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th chapter, kind of. So like that's how they're doing that. So it is speeding up the story a little bit, while the pacing doesn't feel necessarily bad. So that's a good thing, the series. And the cast as well, I like them for the most part. I think they all fit. The acting is a little bit iffy for some of them, just a little bit, but like not necessarily as like waffly as it is for Avatar. There's a few acting issues, but nothing too bad. My issue with it is the things that they changed for the adaptation. I don't necessarily understand why they did when they were working fine in the book. And it's even stranger because Rick Riordan worked on the show with, like, he was a main producer on the show, helping with the show. And I can understand an author going back, working on a show, working on an adaptation, and altering some things from the original writing. Neil Gaiman did this with American Gods when he actually was working with American Gods. He did this with Sandman a little bit. He did this with Good Omens, and those turned out well. Like those were all, American Gods is his own little thing that had some issues itself. But for the most part, all those turned out really well. We're like, yeah, we're going to alter some stuff a little bit, modernize it, bring it up to date a little bit, and like change a few things here and there, and kind of make the story a little bit better. All that's good. So like, I don't necessarily understand the changes they're making here And a lot of the changes have to deal with when events happen and how those events happen. And just like with Avatar, I don't want to go into spoilers for this stuff because I want people to actually watch this series and like enjoy it for what they want to enjoy it for. But there are certain moments from the books or from the book, I should say, because it's adapting the first book. There are certain moments from the book that are pretty like iconic in how they are, and they were changed in the series. One particular that I'm not going to say here because it is a complete divergence from how the book was, but there's one in general that just stuck with me where I'm like, why did they change it like this? And that one's even more complicated because like the change they made for it was like, okay, I like the idea behind this change, I don't like how they're going through with this change. And that is, I apologize for being vague and cryptic with all that, but again, I don't want to spoil anything for you all. So yeah, the changes feel weird. The other thing that just isn't hitting for me, and this is again dealing with the changes they made in the adaptation, was I don't feel any chemistry with the main three. And they're supposed to be like best friends by the end of this book, and I am not feeling anything. The worst part is the fact that Percy and Grover are supposed to be like lifelong best friends, and by the middle of the first episode, Percy hates Grover, and Grover just leaves. Like, he's just not there until the end of the episode where they move the plot along. And by the time they actually get the quest, Percy's like, yeah, Grover, I'm going to pick you because you're my friend. And it's like, we haven't seen at all in this series you two being friends with each other. Like, there is no point in this series beyond a minor part of a flashback where we see you two being friends. And it's like, what is happening here? Same thing with Annabeth, where it's like I'm choosing Annabeth because she's like the smartest and strongest one here, and it's like, you just did one competition with Annabeth and you heard some backstory from another character about her, and you're just choosing her from that? Like, I understand why, because you have to, because that's how the book goes, but like at this point you don't know anything about these people. Like, you don't know anything about anybody at this camp, and Grover and you have not been friends this whole series. So like, what is going on there? So that's a weird thing that happened there. Grover is actually a big issue that I've had with the whole series so far, and it all comes down to a fundamental change they made for the character that I feel like most people won't notice, especially if you haven't read the book. If you haven't read the book, you're definitely not gonna notice it all. But in the book, Grover's a satyr. He's a satyr. He is a protector of Percy. That's his whole deal, and he's a satyr. Well, in the story, they have this whole mystical thing called the Mist that hides all like the mythological elements from the world from, you know, normal humans. And it's just like, oh, it's not like a big like rhinoceros mythical beast. It's a garbage truck kind of a thing. Or it's like, oh, it's not a satyr. It's just a dude. It's just a dude who has like a funny walk. Well, Grover, to hide the fact that he's a satyr, usually wears a hat. Just straight up, he wears a hat, has really curly hair, so boom, hides his horns. And to hide his goat legs, he has prosthetic legs, and he walks on crutches. So in a sense, the story is shining a light and giving a character for disabled readers, which is cool. It has like an avatar, or it has like a stand-in for you know, disabled readers, which is a cool thing. Now, yes, there is a little bit of some, you know, iffy stuff you want to say, the fact that like the goat person is the stand-in for disabled readers, but whatever. It's the thought. I feel like it's the thought that counts there, to like, you know, show some representation for the most part. In the show, Grover just doesn't do that. He just walks fine. Before we find out he's a satyr, he has no disability, no crutches, no nothing. So it's like, he's just a kid? And then when we find out he's a satyr, it's like, oh, that's just kind of out of the blue. Whoa, okay, he's just a satyr now. And there was like no build up to it. And that issue alone ties into a much larger issue that I already talked about with Avatar, where there's so much hand-holding and so much unneeded exposition that the mystery of the story isn't there. And because there's no mystery, because of the fact that they keep telling us everything, and we're not learning anything when Percy's learning it. And Percy is the POV character of the book and of the show, so when he learns something, we as an audience should be learning something because we're following his journey. And there's no instance of us as an audience learning something that isn't just directly told to him immediately. And it really takes away from the entire narrative of the show and changes fundamentally how the show plays out and how the story plays out, which feels strange as hell, because he's just told everything. So that's just weird. They're also just cutting out some of the smaller elements that kind of like help further out the story, help build the story a bit. They cut out some elements there, and they've sped some elements up, which is, I can't really complain or critique or anything there. There's like one at the very beginning, I'm like, okay, they took this out, and that kind of makes things a little weird, but you know, whatever. They took out one of the big like plot points, and it kind of has made the rest of the series feel a little strange since then, because there's kind of not really a driving force behind certain things. But, you know, beyond that, whatever. And there's just like some weird stuff there. And the chemistry between the lead three, I just don't feel it. And I'm not really feeling their characters either. Especially Annabeth. Annabeth is the weird one. Because, like, she just feels so emotionless and so cold. And it's like, that's not Annabeth. Annabeth is a very intelligent, very wise, very, like, forward-talking, forward-thinking character that like challenges Percy on some of his ideas, but you know, ultimately goes with him because she's like, yeah, these are kind of decent enough ideas. This Annabeth just seems to hate everyone, and it's like, what happened with this character? So I don't want to get too much into other stuff as well, but there are some good things about this show so far. Visually, I think the lighting could be a little bit better, but visually speaking, all the monsters look phenomenal. Some of the changes from Adaptation they did with some of the monsters, beautiful. Absolutely love them. The fact that we're actually seeing some of them a little bit more, also great. I love the casting for Mr. D for Dionysus. That is spot on, perfect. The character of Clarice, the character of Clarice, daughter of Ares, didn't necessarily like her when I first saw her. She really grew on me by the second episode, and I'm like, yep, that's Clarice, all right. That's exactly what I was thinking in the book. Not exactly like visually what I was thinking in the book, but personality-wise, like, yep, that's Clarice. So she's great. All the mythological stuff I think is hitting right now for me, and I think is really, really well done. It's just, again, the backing of everything. Like, visually, the show is fine. This is literally just like with Avatar, where like it is a perfectly iced cake that has some good decorations to it, but man, that cake is a little moist because it is not baked all the way. And again, I'm only halfway through the series. I'm assuming it's going to get better. I know episode 5 we get Ares in there, and I'm very excited for that, being a wrestling fan, because Adam Copeland is playing Ares, and I am a wrestling fan, so I want to see Edge play Ares, and I am very excited for that. So, and I've heard he's really good in the show too. So, I'm hoping the rest of the series gets a little bit better, but at the moment I am disappointed with it because they've changed certain things in the show, certain actual story elements in the show, and actual character elements in the show, that just fundamentally change the characters and the story, and I don't understand exactly why they changed them when there is really no need to change them. And with Adaptation, there is room for change. Like Adaptation, there is always room for change, always room to improve the story or alter the story to fit a different audience. And just like with Avatar, I don't understand what audience they're trying to go for. Are they trying to go for an older audience, also understand that audience isn't going to pay attention or doesn't necessarily want to watch the show anyway because it's quote-unquote a kids thing? Or are they trying to appeal to the original fans of the show and then just failing because they're changing so much stuff about it? Or are they trying to go for something in the middle? I don't know what audience these two shows are for, and I don't know why they made the changes they did to try and fit an audience that I'm not sure they're aiming for. And that's just the issue overall. I think ultimately, between the two shows, I think I'm liking Percy Jackson more than I'm liking Avatar, because at least with Percy Jackson, we're still following the basic beats of the book, and it still feels like Percy Jackson. It just doesn't feel like a good adaptation of Percy Jackson from what I was expecting it to be, but it does also feel more accurate to the story than the original movie did, but the original movie had better characters to the book. It's weird and complicated, and the same thing is going on with Avatar with like the M. Night Shyamalan movie, though it is better than the M. Night Shyamalan movie, we'll say that. But that's basically my thoughts here. Let me know down in the comments below if you've seen both of these or if you've seen any of the either of these series, and what do you think about them? Like, you know, respectfully, like, do you agree? Do you disagree? What are your thoughts? Just what are your thoughts? I want to hear your thoughts. I want to, like, you know, be able to have this discussion in the comments with you all, because I am very intrigued to hear what people are saying, especially if you. What I really want to hear is, like, if you've watched Avatar, if you watched like the original series of Avatar, and if you've read the original book series of Percy Jackson, and you're now watching these, what are your thoughts? And on the flip side, if you hadn't watched the original Avatar series and had not read Percy Jackson and are now watching the series completely fresh with no thoughts about the original stories, what are you feeling as well? And I really do want to know that. I really want to hear what your opinions are, coming from a standpoint of not having experienced these stories before, and also from the standpoint of somebody who has experienced these stories before. Definitely want to know your thoughts on everything, and let me know those down in the comments below so we can have a nice discussion about that and talk, you know, respectfully about that as well. Just fun thing at the end here, just fun thing. I've been playing Power Wash Simulator. It's fun. It's just really fun. I've been playing Power Wash Simulator, and the new Magic the Gathering cards come out on Friday for Fallout. I'm really excited for those because I like Fallout a lot, and I really want to play Fallout again because Fallout's really fun, and I like the whole idea of Fallout. And I've been trying to get a little bit back into Magic as well, because Magic's one of those like big things. But, you know, I've been playing Pokemon Lorcana so much. I love Lorcana so much. New set just came out. It's so great. But I want to try and get back into Magic a little bit. So, like, those are the fun things going on in my life, too. Those are the fun things. So, it's not all grim and grimdark, dour cynicalness from these shows or anything. There is some fun stuff going on. So, just saying, you know, there's some fun stuff. So, enjoy the fun stuff in life, too. Like, have those fun things and just, like, you know, be a little critical of the things that you're watching. Be a little critical of the things you love. But beyond all that, like I said, let me know down in the comments below what you're thinking, and also what you've been doing this past month as well. If you've watched or seen anything you want to talk about or anything, let me know that down in the comments below. And if you like this podcast thing, leave a like. It helps out. I am trying to do one of these. I'm trying to do one of these each month at the beginning of the month, roughly beginning of the month, if I can schedule out properly. I'm trying to do one of these at least a month because it's cool. I like doing these first week of the month. Just let everyone know what I'm up to. So if you like it, leave a like. It helps out in the algorithm and stuff. And if you want to see more from the channel, I do reaction videos, video essays sometimes, and like review retrospective stuff as well. Go ahead and subscribe as well. It does help out as we're on the journey to 1,000 subscribers, and you also can become part of the community so you can watch all the videos as well. And yeah, this episode I got under an hour, so there we go. So with that, I'm going to end it here. If you want to see more right over on the channel, is a playlist you can watch as well, and next to it is going to be a video that you recommends for you as well. And until next time, just stay critical, but stay loving the things you love, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, peace, everyone. Peace.